West Tigers podcast. We're up to episode number 326. And unfortunately, it's business as usual. It's a post-loss edition of the West Tigers podcast. Knights 20, the Tigers 14 on Saturday afternoon. Recording a little bit late. A few guys around here doing their Mother's Day duties on Sunday night. So we had to postpone to Monday night, but that's okay. We're here now. Let's have a look at some one-word submissions that came in from Facebook in regards to that game against the Knights. Grant took a little bit of liberty. I think Grant came up with 6 different words. So we'll go through Grant's 6 words. Dumb, young, lost, compounding mistakes, inexperience, and also reality. Corey's one word was Naden. Barney's one word was three-peat, which is a really, really depressing prospect. Thank goodness for South. Jamie, his one word was shoulders. On the West Tigers podcast forum, the one-word submissions really flooded in. Tigersman, 30 seconds, saying the first half ended 30 seconds too late. Chris, the word was finesse, or a lack thereof. Jedi Tiger, his word was Bennett. In other words, get Bennett here ASAP, but I think, speaking of the aforementioned South, he might be going there. Dirty Reds, his word was dumb. Lack of intelligence at any level in the team. Mike's word was percentages. We need to get the 1%ers right. Canberra Tiger, ice. So, in other words, Papali played well, but is like the team. Just like ice, melts over time, turns to water. That's very clever, Canberra Tiger. Enumerator, dumb. Overly expansive on a slippery field. Good point, Enumerator. Nath Tiger, the bye. I can't wait for it. Tiger 5150 IQ. So we always do low IQ plays that cost us. Logan R21, irreparable. The problems are embedded in the culture of this team. The last Ronan, gormless. That's a good one that comes up every now and then. Tiger Ton, Naden. Lorenzo, size, or a lack of size in our backs. Matt V. Tiger simply said, we suck. And Tiger Town SFS, unfortunately, was channeling with Barney and saying three-peat. So I don't like some of those ones. Gary Watson, good evening to you. One word, please, to describe the game against the Knights, please.
There's plenty, and there's a lot of different one words used there. Stole a couple of mine. But I'll probably go with Bradman Best. Our inability to contain him out wide, I think, really cost us on the weekend. Naden's inability to shut him down, I think that combination, that contest between Bradman Best and Naden is probably what resulted in us losing that game on the weekend.
He's got lots of upper body strength, Bradman Best. He really showed his class in that game. Eddie Otto, how are you doing?
Good, Joel. We always like to ask how I'm doing. You didn't ask how Gary was doing.
No, that's true.
We worry about you, Eddie.
Yeah, that's right. We're all worried about you.
That's fair enough.
Yes.
That's fair enough.
One word, please.
I couldn't get it down to one, but I just went with Groundhog Day, Joel, because, again, plenty of effort for no result. Times where we looked the better side, missed opportunities, frustration. And I noticed, those one-word submissions, there were quite a few repeats in there. There was dumb, there was Naden, there was three-peat. My favourite one, though, was bye, Joel, because I always look forward to the bye these days.
Yeah, weekend off. Yeah.
I really think, Eddie, that the key point that you hit there about us being unable to kind of maintain that pressure and playing at that same level and only being able to play at a decent level for perhaps 50 to 70% of the game, that's what's losing us games at the moment. It's that inability to stick with a side for the full 80 minutes and where we go to sleep. And the commentators were talking about it during the game, that key part of that game through that 40 to 60 minute mark, we just can't hang on. And that's where we lost that game on the weekend. So I think that's quite apt.
Yeah, well, that's one of my one words. It was going to be 80 minutes. I've also got another number for my one word submission, and that's 8. i.e. 8 seconds. That's how long was on the clock at the end of the first half when we conceded that try. Also another number, 14 points, which seems to be our upper limit of the amount of points that we can score in a game. 14 once again. It's just not going to be enough to consistently win any games. Joyless, one that I used last week. But I'd also like to put in resilience, because it's been pretty bleak, and it's been pretty bleak for a long time. But the West Tigers fans are still here. We're still hanging in there. We're still doing our best to do what we can to support. So I think a pat on the back for our fellow West Tigers fans for being resilient to all of the stuff that we have to put up with. We want to dive into and have a closer look at the game. But there's been a little bit of news, bit of development this afternoon, and that is a letter that came out to the members from Shane Richardson, the CEO of the West Tigers, just outlining, I suppose, the key and core takeaway, Gary, was that they're saying that, look, we're not happy with where things are at, but wheels are in motion and things are happening. I thought it was a good strategy. We did used to talk a little bit about a lack of clear communication from the club. As I read somewhere on a social media, maybe on the West Tigers podcast forum, how refreshing it is to get that directly from the CEO rather than reading about it via a leak in the Sydney Morning Herald. So I think Richardson should be congratulated on putting that letter out, and I think it's very timely after 6 wins. But what do you say to the fans other than just have faith, I suppose?
I really wish it was 6 wins, like you just said, Joel.
6 losses.
You got me a little bit excited there for a second. But
wait a minute, what's a win?
Yeah, I don't know. But for me, it's a really hard sell to our club at the moment. I know we've spoken for a long time about wanting to know about the direction out of this, and it's really hard because we're a side that hasn't played finals football in 12 seasons now. And basically what you're asking for is for the fan base to be more patient. That it's not going to be, well, it's obviously not going to be this year, and there's a chance that while we'll improve next year, that it's not going to be next year as well. And that's a really tough sell. But it's exactly what I was speaking about at the start of the year. We've made some massive changes in our club, some massive off-field changes, and I don't think it was ever realistic to think that's going to turn our club around on the field in that first season. The guys we got coming in, and it's obvious that our club needed to be rebuilt. That's why we started the petition last year. That's why there was a review done on the club. That's why there were changes made at the club. And that's why I was pushing for patience from the fan base this year, because I'm not at all surprised that this is another difficult year for us, and it's hard to watch, and it's horrible, and I get as depressed as everyone else does when we lose, but I don't think it was ever... Maybe the 2 wins early in the season got the hopes up of the fan base a little bit and kind of gave us that false feeling that things on the field were going to turn around quicker than what they probably deserve to. But we're a club that's been horribly run for the last 10 years at least. Having new people in place and expecting change to happen in that first 6 months on the field, I don't think ever was realistic. But it is a hard sell because it is a fan base that has been starved of success for over a decade.
Eddie, I mean, I've got to agree with Gary, but then I've also got to put the other side of that on and say, if you looked at the team that ran out on Saturday, and if you looked at maybe us at our strongest, if you add Caesar back in, you've got a team of, say, of the 17 players, you've probably got 12 guys that have played first grade at other clubs and often at quite competitive clubs. When you look at the Appies and you look at the other guys, you know, Papali from Parramatta played in a grand final, etc. Like, there's the excuses and there is the having to be patient, but I think we should be doing better. When I look at that team and I look at Justin Olam, a perfect example, he won premierships with Melbourne. Like, it's not like we're fielding a team like in the old days when you go back to the 90s and you sort of look at a roster or look at a team and you kind of go, there's a lot of reserve graders there. Like, I think they're underperforming. That's my feeling. We should be doing better than the very lowly position we're finding ourselves in.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because I think you might have mentioned on the weekend after the game, just when we were chatting, there's no real poor sides anymore. Like in the 90s and 2000s, there were, your South Queensland Crushers or your Western Reds or your Gold Coast sitting at the bottom of the table that were just really bad sides where you could go, well, we're going to come into this game as favourites. So we've started one game this year as favourites, and that was a 5-cent favourite which is a flip of the coin game against St George, where I didn't think we should have been favourites.
Yeah.
So in terms of market expectation, and obviously market it's built into your performance over the week, so we have something to do with that, performing poorly. But in terms of market expectations, we're probably one win ahead of where people thought we would be. I wouldn't say, looking at the games itself, there's any games that we've lost that we deserve to win. There were a few games there that are close on the scoreboard where there's moments where we look the better side. So it's definitely, the eye test tells you it's better than last year, even though I saw a stat that the for and against is almost exactly the same in terms of the differential this time last year, which seems a bit strange because I got this memory in my head that last year we were getting pumped regularly in the first 9 or 10 weeks and in 2022. But, yeah, the real sad thing, Joel, is the easiest time to jag wins is in the first 9 or 10 weeks. And then when you start to get suspensions, injuries, the good sides start to hit their peak, it becomes monotonous and it becomes even harder to jag wins. So, we've only got 2. We've got the Dolphins who get their players back. We're missing players. Then the Cowboys on a 5-day turnaround. And it's just really, I can't imagine what it's like. I feel sorry for the players in some regard because there's plenty of effort there. You're right, though. There are moments where senior players do let us down, and whether that's a systemic thing culturally. I noticed there was a thread on the West Tigers forum about psychology, and that surely comes into it when you come to a club. And you must, I remember everyone hates on Bray Finastra, and so did I. But, I remember when he spoke about when he came to the club and, I'm sure it's different now, but they had to make their own Gatorade or bring their own Gatorade and just culture shocks. I'm sure there's some of that maybe for people that come from winning organisations into ours. It has been a systemic failure in terms of how it's been run, like Gary said, for over a decade. So I'll talk about the Richo email itself in a minute, but that's how I'd react to your. I don't think we're necessarily underperforming in terms of ladder position, but there certainly is frustration in terms of how games sort of get away.
That comment about there not being bad sides anymore, the spin on that is we're coming off 2 wooden spoons. So we're playing, every side we play every week is a side that finished above us in the last 2 years. So there are bad teams. We're back-to-back wooden spooners. We are that kind of bad team that other teams are looking at, and you're coming up against that side that's been down the bottom of the table for 2 years. That's us. So when you're that team, of course it appears that there's no bad teams because you're fighting from the bottom. And that's the perception you have. And it's not a perception we've had as West Tigers fans before. We've always been around that mid-table spot. We've never won a wooden spoon before 2 years ago. We're looking a chance at going 3 in a row for wooden spoons. So we are that bad team at the moment. So the big thing is that process, and I think that's what Richo was trying to explain in that email today, is that process of building our way out of being that bottom team, being that team that everyone kind of relaxes when they get to because there's an easier win coming. And I know there's other teams who have been down and around us and they are improving quicker than us, but we're also 6 months away from what I think was that bad of a management of our club that the fan base had to get together to oust that fan base. And I think that's just going to take time. And I think that's what Shane Richardson's trying to get across. And believe me, I'm getting as frustrated with the games that we're seeing as anyone because that I don't think we've deserved really to win any of the games that we've lost, but there's been winnable games there. Games that if we didn't fall away like we did, if we didn't let in a try with 8 seconds to go last weekend, or we came out in the second half the week before and showed the commitment that we'd shown in the first half, they were games that were there to win. The Bulldogs game when we just didn't come out after half time. That's what's frustrating is there's little glimpses of what we can do, but because of our lack of experience, because of our weaker roster, our side doesn't seem to be able to maintain that good play for a full 80 minutes. And we'll score some nice tries, but then we go and do some dumb things like run the ball over the sideline or those stupid errors because we've got an inexperienced squad. We've got players who probably aren't up to NRL standard, and sure, they can get by with it for 60 minutes in a game, but putting that 80 minutes together of that really strong football is just beyond them.
I don't know if this one's a positive or a negative, Joel. It's probably a negative, but I was thinking of another one word, because I've written down 6 of them, and it was moments. These are 6 moments in this Newcastle game on the Saturday that I just wrote down off the top of my head. In the first 5 minutes, someone put a kick in long and Staines kicked it a mile infield. I thought he could have picked it up and nearly scored himself. So that would have been 6-0. Appy, when he went to ground the ball, he used Twal as a driver, which he can't do. He should know that.
Yeah.
And that would have been a try. So that's 2 tries. Stafford Toa pulls his hamstring when he's going to score a try. So that's just bad luck.
And
unbelievable.
who else would that happen to? Like, seriously,
that's unbelievable.
leading the chase the ball and pulling your hamstring.
And that 3 of those things happened in the first 25 minutes. So they're 3 very near misses for try scoring. Then there's the unforgivable, which is the try 8 seconds before half time, which has nearly happened 3 weeks in a row. Because it happened against Brisbane. It only didn't happen against Canterbury because Olam came from the other side of the field. Yeah. So that's unforgivable. Then there was the try off the kick return, which was a ridiculous 100-metre try, completely out of context of the game, where Charlie Staines just comes in for no reason. And then there's the grubber that doesn't bounce up for Justin Olam, who's going to score in the corner. I'm sure other sides can pick out their moments in a game, because I'm not watching Newcastle, Canterbury, whoever. But there are 6 moments, potentially 3 or 4 tries that could have gone to us, and 1 or 2 tries that went to them. And like I said, I'm not sure if that's a positive or a negative. Could it be infuriating as a coach? But it shows you they're not that far away in terms of some of the games that they play.
But I think that's exactly what I was talking about a moment ago, in that 60 to 80% of the game is what we can kind of compete for. And then due to lack of experience, due to lack of quality in our squad, we have those moments where we let the pressure off, or we let in an easy try, or we fall off a number of tackles like we did in that period where Naden just fell off tackles. That's what kind of happens. They can compete for a large majority of the game, but then there'll be these moments where they can't, because we just can't maintain that level for the full 80 minutes.
And if you're coaching against the West Tigers, you know that if you go into the sheds, reasonably close scores, you start the second half so confident, and the Tigers seem to start with their heads down. And that the Toa hamstring incident and a couple of those other incidents that you talk about where the bounce of the ball didn't go our way, and then the Knights just jagged that lucky try just on half time. They went in with their heads up, and that was game over. That moment was game over when they scored just before half-time, I think, because if not, well, the chances are we've kept them the 14, which is around what we can do if we're ever going to get a win. So we may have jagged a win, but I think it was just a really another really disappointing moment. Stupidity, I think, is sort of it catches, it can get around, because remember the Knights burnt their challenge with the most ridiculous challenge, and that was the 13th minute, and 13 minutes later. I don't know why we burned our challenge when Buller stripped the ball. It was blatantly obvious what had happened. Why did we do that? Does anybody know why we burnt that challenge?
I don't know.
What were we trying to achieve?
Maybe Buller just thought he ripped it before he was held, but he was clearly held, and the risk you run there is, one of the challenge, but 2, you get 10 minutes in the sin bin. And I actually thought, and even the opposition coach pointed it out, the goal line defence was excellent.
Yeah.
And it has been for a lot of this season. So I think John Morris has to take a lot of props for that. But it just, imagine going into the sheds, having done, 7 of the 10 minutes, and you've been on your try line for most of that half, and then there's that try for kick with 8 seconds to go. It just takes all the air out of the balloon. And then there were moments in the second half where we're threatening to get back into it. But again, Brent Naden had his, pumpkin on the head game again, which just happens twice a year for him. And it's inexcusable, because we come up here rapping him 3 times out of 4, but the 4th time he lost us the game by himself, just about. And okay, you can have a shocker against Bradman Best. Whatever. He ran over the top of him. But going over the sideline on play one, like things like that, that's reserve grade standard.
And the thing is, when you can't score points, things like letting in that try right on half time become even more deflating because the pressure, the defensive pressure and being able to keep them out gets so strong that when you let in such a deflating try like that, it compounds it because surely the guys know that we're having trouble scoring points. That 14 points is about our max. And then when you see a try like that let in, it must just take the wind out of your sails as well.
Naden has sort of escaped the shredder discussion in recent times. And you're right, Eddie. And I think one of you guys made the point on the midweek pod last week that if you pick him on the wing, he tends to be a little bit shaken. Like he seems to be more comfortable when you put him in the centres, and he did get moved around a little bit because of the injuries. But I've kind of lost faith in him after that game. It's the Asu Kapoa component. Like I've just got no faith in him. I just feel like whenever you pick him, there's that chance that they're going to have that game that really lets you down. What do you think, Gary? Do you think that, I know we've spoken a lot about Naden and Olam in the centres, and that seemed to work pretty well against the Bulldogs. It didn't at least seem too much of a weakness. I was disappointed when he was picked on the wing, and I thought he had a really, really poor game.
Yeah, look, he did get moved around a fair bit on the weekend, but I think he tends to go missing a little bit more when he's on the wing and kind of fades in and out of games a little bit more on the wing, and I don't think that's what's best for him. But he spent plenty of time in the centres on the weekend, and the biggest dramas I had with him on the weekend was when he was playing in the centres against Bradman Best, because that's when Bradman Best pretty much gave him a bath. So I don't think it was just because he was playing on the wing on the weekend, though I was worried about it leading into the game. I think the biggest problems were his defensive issues against Bradman Best. You're right, Eddie, though, that going into the touch, that seems to be the type of error he makes way too often. And that's what I've been talking about, that he needs to get those dumb plays out of his game. It's not just plays like that where he goes in the touch. It's the ill-disciplined plays, which thankfully we haven't seen too much of so far this season. But he's prone for a really dumb sort of tackle or a shoulder charge or something like that every couple of weeks as well. So they're the type of things that he needs to get out of his game, because playing in the centres, he does have some strike power and he does have the ability to open sides up, but we can't have him going into touch like that, and we can't have him falling off a number of tackles against his opposite centre.
Dumb is the word. Like Charlie Staines, who, as you guys know, I'm a bit of a Charlie Staines fan. I think he tries hard, but that kick chase where they just didn't number up at all, and the Knights went all the way down the field, and Papali'i with his throwing his leg out, like that was not even reserve grade sort of stuff. That was just, I couldn't believe that somebody of his experience would do that. The other part too that drives me a little bit crazy is not contesting the ball, Eddie. Like that happened a number of times in the game in that second half where, for whatever reason, the winger and the fullback are just staring at each other and there didn't seem to be any communication. Like that to me in NRL level is inexcusable.
Well, you mentioned losing the challenge early before. I reckon we've done that a couple of times this year. And I think it's probably a trend of the teams that are at the bottom is that attention to detail. Like how many tries have we scored off kicks this year? I don't think, like when we put a bomb up on the last, there's just no threat. I know these disruptors have changed it a little bit and teams are a little bit more reluctant to jump. And then eventually when the ball goes in the air, you're worried something. And even like the short dropouts, have we ever got a short dropout back once this year? Like, I don't know. It's just those little attention to details, which I'm sure they do practice it. But you watch teams like that are at the pointy end of the competition and it seems like they have a real strategy for things like that. So that's just another area where we sort of, fall short in.
Those challenges that we're getting wrong, to me, I kind of compare it to a gambler on tilt. They know that they're up against the odds and they keep betting big, trying to get that big win. And I kind of think that's what we're doing in those situations. Like we know we know we're struggling to score points. We know we're struggling to build pressure. And then when we make an error, we go all in instead of calmly assessing the situation. We're kind of in that panic frame of mind, and we just go to try and get out of a terrible situation. And by doing that, just like that gambler who goes in all in when he shouldn't, you end up in a worse position because you lose that challenge. And I kind of see it like a lot of games we're kind of on tilt and we need to get that pressure, and it happens it comes out in a number of ways, and I think those challenges is just one of the symptoms of that.
The aforementioned Isaiah Papali, he's going to be suspended, of course, for the week for that trip. His game at lock, he didn't stay the whole game there, but I thought
fantastic.
I thought he did really well. He scored 2 tries, which wasn't necessarily because he was playing lock, but I thought he was the best version of a lock that we've had so far this year. That's no knock on Fanua Pole, but I thought he did very, very well. Gary, you are in agreement.
Yeah, 100%. I thought that was his best game at the club. And I bagged out Sullivan quite heavily going into the game and been bagging him out. But I thought that combination between when Asaya went back onto the edge, between Sullivan and Ice went quite well as well. I thought that was a strong positive. I thought he was giving him good ball, and I don't think it's the type of ball he's got at the club. But I do believe moving forward, especially, he's been caught out a number of times through the year defending on the edge with his lateral movement. His lateral movement's been poor, and he's been beaten, and it's led to tries. Jeremy Marshall-King, as an example, went straight up the middle of us because of Papali's poor lateral movement. Defending in the middle, that lateral movement isn't as critical because you're in tight and you've got other players around you, and if you do tend to get beat, there's usually 2 guys going into a tackle. So I think that improves his defensive issues, and I thought it's the best he's ran the ball playing at lock. He's a real genuine threat with the ball, and I think if we play him there for an extended period, I think he'll actually develop to be able to ball play a bit from that position as well, because he has shown this year he can throw a decent pass, and he's a little bit more structured than Bateman is in that role, and I do believe that he's our best option there moving forward, especially with the way Sam Fainu's come through. I think he's got a mortgage on one edge, so I think having Ice in the middle is the way forward.
Just going back to just handing out a couple of pumpkins to the NRL, and maybe this isn't necessarily a discussion point. You guys might not have a point on this, but in the first minute, the Knights got a penalty for high contact. In the 8th minute, Naden nearly had his head taken off, and we didn't get a penalty. And I'm not saying that's not anything about the West Tigers. It's not a conspiracy theory against the West Tigers, but it just seems so inconsistent, Gary.
Yeah, I was really disappointed in that penalty because what are you meant to do when a guy goes in the tackle and he purposely ducks his head into the contact?
Yeah.
Which is what happened. He put his head down.
Yep.
And the one later, Naden did a very similar thing. He lowered his head as well, and there was no penalty in that situation. But I don't know how you avoid that contact when the guy purposely drops his head.
That's right.
It's a little bit different. I can understand when a guy slips and you've got to take the care. But once a guy is purposely lowering his head into contact and leading with his head, it makes it really, really difficult as a defender to avoid that contact. And I thought that was a very poor penalty.
The other thing that doesn't make any sense to me is, in just like speaking in general terms here, like Papali sticks his leg out. Once upon a time, you'd be sent off for that.
Should be a send-off.
We only got penalised for that. But Buller, not necessarily picking on Buller, but all he does is rip the ball out, and he gets 10 minutes. He wasn't going to hurt anybody. He wasn't going to cause any damage. He wasn't going to break anybody's leg. That just seems odd when you think about that. If you didn't know the game and you were watching it, you'd be like, man, that guy nearly broke that other guy's leg. This guy's just pulled a ball out. Why does he go off for 10 minutes?
I think it's probably because the Buller one was off a Newcastle break, so they deemed that, professional foul where he's trying to impede, what's going to be a next play switch. But yeah, I think I used up all my energy on the referee last week, Joel.
Yeah.
Much energy to give.
That's it.
In saying that, if Ice doesn't trip him, they score. So it was a really bad one.
Yep.
It was a terrible attempt at tackle. He lashed out with the leg. I'm firmly of the belief I came through in a generation that no matter what, a trip was an automatic send-off. It was one of the biggest dog acts you could do in a game of football.
Yep.
And I don't like that we've gone away from that. To be honest, to get a penalty, if that had just stayed as a penalty and not a suspension, then it was the right choice for him to trip him because it prevented a try. And if it only gave away a penalty, then that was the right choice. And that's not rugby league at all for me. That to me, a trip is a send off. And even though it was a West Tigers player, a player who played quite well on the weekend, I thought that should have been a send off.
Yeah. We last week we were talking about Caesar's been suspended and this player's injured and that player's injured, and we were worried about what the team was going to look like.
Worse.
Yeah, well, that's my point. Bateman, he's done that pec injury. He's not going to be available. What are we thinking in terms of any selection forecasts at this point? Do you think that? I mean, I think that probably Pole will go back to lock, and Fainu will keep his spot. Well, I don't know who's going to play on that other edge. Are we looking at a Seyfarth maybe to start, do you think?
Yeah, it's scraping the bottom of the barrel there. I mean, I think I'm a little bit more of a Seyfarth fan than Gary is, but I'm not a fan of him starting in the back row. But what else do you do, Joel? I've got to be honest. Haven't been watching the reserve grade. I do see the results come through, and they're not exactly very appetising. So
they did have a win on the weekend, which was good.
Okay, yeah. Good stuff. But yeah, I mean, Declan or someone's probably in a better position to let me know or let Tigers fans out there know if there's anyone who deserves a game. But yeah, unfortunate for Ice, because I agree with you guys, it was his best game for the club, and I thought that role probably brings out the best. It simplifies it for a little bit for him. He's not having to worry about, one, defensively, and two, when he's going to get the ball. It's just a little bit more constant. He can work hard. Missing him and Bateman's, even though haven't been exceptional, it's a big blow for this side just because of the lack of that depth in that back row. But yeah, just that the other frustrating thing is that they've been two regular targets of me and a lot of Tigers fans this year is Sullivan and Papali'i, and they were our two best.
Yeah,
along with Bora, I thought they were probably our three best on the weekend. So that's the thing. It's just you get these guys that who are the ones who were disappointing and actually have a good game. So you think that must equate to a win, but then some of the other guys let you down. So,
yeah, well, I was going to mention Sullivan next, Gary. I thought it was his best game that he's had for us, coming off a low base. A little bit of talk that South are potentially looking at taking Jaden Sullivan off our hands, but of course now with Caesar suspended, you would think that if that was on the cards, that would be delayed until Caesar's back.
Yeah, we can't really afford to let him go at this point in time because the depth just isn't there in the halves, and Fainu, that hamstring is a little bit of concern because it's been causing him issues all season, and then to be out again with it, and hamstrings are notorious for getting right again, so that's a concern for him moving forward. I thought Sullivan was fantastic on the weekend, apart from he had a bad miss on Bradman Best as well, with the fend in the chest. That was a really poor attempt. But I thought he was really good. What was pleasing is I did speak about on the pod last week about his footwork inside the 20 and his ability to open sides up in the 20 using that footwork. He did a little bit of that on the weekend, and I don't think we'd really seen him do that at all in his previous outings in first grade. So that was really pleasing to see, and I think that gave him that little bit of confidence that he's been lacking. So I was very pleased to see him play that level of game on the weekend, which over the next couple of weeks we're going to be relying on him to do it, because I don't think we're going to see Fainu back in the next couple of weeks, and we all know Caesar's suspended, so we need some quality football from him over the next couple of weeks.
Well, the strength in his game is his running game, isn't it? It's kind of like Luke Brooks, and that's the thing, is that if he is our organising half, that's probably not ideal. But if he provides a little bit of spark when he gets the ball, then that does a little bit compensate for that. Galvin, I read somewhere, I don't know if you guys agree, that the other teams have, to a degree, worked him out. For where he's at with this point in his career, they seem to be doing a pretty good job of shutting him down. Eddie, any thoughts on Galvin's game?
Yeah, I don't think that's unexpected when you come back into a struggling team who's scoring 2 tries a game, and the great White Hope comes back, 18-year-old kid. So I still really happy with his game. Probably running the ball a couple of times when he maybe shouldn't, just because of his weight. But I'd rather that than someone disappear into a game. Like he's not doing that, and the changes in terms of having Caesar there and Sullivan some weeks probably not helping as well. So he's been a little bit quieter, but I still think he's an excellent prospect. Defensively, again, missed no tackles on the weekend. It's probably, that's one thing he'll have to learn. Like anyone who comes in, you have your first 2 or 3 games and no one knows what your pet plays are and whatnot. And then all of a sudden, if teams are studying West Tigers now, he's probably number 1 or 2 on the list in terms of what does this guy do? How do we shut him down? How do we get in his face? So that's something he'll have to deal with. But I think he's still going well, albeit maybe a little bit quieter games the last couple of weeks than the start of the year.
Without previewing it, because you guys will do it on the midweek, or whoever is on with Eddie, the host of the midweek West Tigers podcast. But I just wanted to mention ahead of that Dolphins game that they really when we played them earlier in the year, that Bennett really had the absolute 100% correct game plan for the West Tigers. So I hope that the West Tigers are able to look at that video and go, well, we need to be better around defensively around the ruck. The Dolphins kept spearing back in behind the ruck, and they made a lot of ground that way, but their line speed, which is the same as what the Knights did and the same as what the Bulldogs did, if you want to shut the West Tigers offense down, get right up in our face. And we have to come up with a way of being able to counter that, of still providing a threat. But whether or not we have the cattle to do that, I don't know. You guys have said Papali'i had a really good game and a couple of others, but I think we've got to mention Twal, who really responded very well. I thought he was very, very good and actually provided some impact off the bench. Not seeing a lot of agreement on your faces. I thought he was a lot better than he'd been in previous weeks. Gary?
I thought he was a lot better than he has been in previous weeks, but and I think he provided a little bit better punch, and I thought he was better, but I still think we're needing more out of him. And again, I still don't think we get enough out of having Seyfarth and Twal both on the bench. I think they're too similar, and they provide pretty much the exact same thing. And he doesn't have that impact we kind of need. But I did think it was a better game for him on the weekend, but I thought he'd been pretty poor leading into last weekend.
He got that one-on-one steal, Joel. Did you see that? So that was something to add to his stats for the season.
I was going to mention that. That was the highlight of the afternoon, one of the rare highlights.
It was the highlight for me as well. It was very well done.
Yes. Just to explain what we're talking about is when he sneakily stole the sticky spray off the Knights trainer. And it was great because the camera didn't move. I thought the camera's going to move in a second, but the camera stayed there, and he just very sneakily did it. So, when he retires from rugby league, maybe professional pickpocket will be Alex Twal's next career. The Dolphins, look, they've been pretty impressive. I don't think they're unbeatable, and I don't think that we're absolutely no chance. Like, there's a little bit of faith there that we might be able to do the classic ambush and maybe win that game. But 14 points is not going to do it. How are we going to score more than 14 points, Gary? What do we have to do to make that happen? What do we need to do differently? Do we need maybe a back row that's got a little bit more, like Fainu's definitely going to have that left edge, but on that right edge, pick someone that provides a bit more of a threat. I don't know who that may be, but mix it up a bit, do something different. Like Sheens would probably pick some crazy team for this game, going back to the classic Sheens days.
Really, the big thing we need to improve on is we're getting killed on line speed, as you said a moment ago. As soon as the side gets up in our face, we don't have the ability to punch through that. We need a little bit more impact from our front row, primarily Stefano. I think he's been quite poor the last month of football. I thought he started the season excellent. He was hitting the line hard. He was bumping guys off, and he was going over the top. Now, to combat line speed, you need to go through the line with your middle forwards, and we're not doing that. We're hitting the line. Clem's working hard, but his forward momentum that he continues is while he's standing, got players hanging off him, which allows the rest of the defensive line to set and doesn't really prevent that high line speed that sides have been getting for us. So we really need a guy that can punch through that line so the rest of the side can't set the defensive line. And I think that will go a long way to creating a little bit more space for our halves to work in, create a little bit more space for our backs to work in, because at the moment, I think that's our biggest problem. Our halves don't have the time to create. And while we are creating chances, especially through Buller at the moment, I think he's doing really well at creating space for the players outside him, which was something I was being fairly critical of. He's still not straightening in regards to do that, but he's getting some nice balls away. I think we need to create a bit more space for those halves, especially having Sullivan, who's not hugely experienced, and having Galvin out there, who is struggling a little bit with defences getting up on him quick. So I think it really comes down to creating that space through the middle, and I think a lot of that needs to fall on Stefano's shoulders.
I think, Joel, to answer your question quite simply, how are we going to win? We need the opposition to play poorly. That sounds a bit defeatist, but I think it's just the reality. You look at that Cronulla game, okay, you could argue we forced them into playing poorly, but they were shocking that day. Parramatta were pretty shocking the week after it. And you look at that win now 6 weeks after, and, they've won, I think, 1 out of 6 without Mitchell Moses. And that was a game where we were 14-6, 8 down for most of it, really battling. So we need the opposition to be below their best, and we have to be somewhere near our best. That's the problem with being one of these bottom teams. You need the scales to tilt sort of in that direction. And Dolphins, I think they've been fantastic. They've got so much speed in their team. That's going to be the problem for us. If it's a dry track there, the good thing is it's the last game, a magic game, so it could be an absolute potato, the field, by then, which might help it.
I think that time slot actually helps us a fair bit. It's a huge weekend. It has a lot of hype around it. And for a side that's flying quite high, like the Dolphins is, coming up against the side that's down the bottom of the table in the worst time slot of the weekend, I can see a Dolphin side that does show up and doesn't play to its best, just due to it's like that 6 o'clock game on the Sunday night is almost an afterthought of that weekend. And I do think that time slot helps us. Plus, you are right. If that field gets a bit chopped up, it does limit their outside backs and what they can do as well. So, it sounds stupid. My hope is that the time slot helps us and we do get a Dolphin side that isn't quite on 100% of its game.
And it's the most compassionate time for the West Tigers to play, because that way your weekend doesn't get ruined.
No. At least I'm over these 3 o'clock Saturdays, Joel. Yeah. The boys would know I was sort of splitting my time a bit. I was watching some of the horse racing just because I just don't like my Saturdays being ruined every week with frustrating. So this 6 o'clock Sunday game, I don't know how it's going to work for your podcast next week, because it means we'll be on air straight after it. So you might want to cancel me out of that, because this extra day's preparation, I think, has helped settle me down.
Yeah, you don't want. No one needs to hear Eddie like 5 minutes after a game.
Joel, can I just talk about the Richardson email for a minute?
Sure.
I might ask you one or two things, because everyone's probably seen it, because I know it was for West Tigers members, but it quickly made its way onto the newspapers and stuff. And he broke it down into probably 7 or 8 different things. It was roster, coaching, elite juniors, recruitment, pathway and development, New South Wales Cup, culture. And then there was a little summary. And there was only probably there was some of those bullet points were just token things, what he said. I hated the first paragraph, Joel. I know I'm nitpicking here, but I just thought, for a guy who talks about no bullcrap, he had a paragraph about, there's going to be highs and lows, ups and downs, disappointment and elation. And I just thought, where's the elation been the last, where's the highs? There's plenty of low. I just didn't think that paragraph was necessary. I just thought cut straight to the chase. And what I liked about what he said was, it's crucial we're patient and stick to the plan. And at the end, in his summary, he said, it's hard work and it's a process just to stick to the journey and divided will failure is a certainty. So I know that swipes at the previous management, but that's reality, isn't it? They were the things that I get faith in Shane Richardson for. Is he's not going to be blown off the track by sort of losing streak in terms of his overall strategy.
Yeah, that's right. It was him sort of sending the warning shot to say, don't start on us because we have a plan and we deserve some opportunity to put that plan into place, which is absolutely true. I mean, he didn't take the job until January, and then it was only on an interim basis. So there is every case for patience for everybody, because as I mentioned to you guys, like if we were a struggling business, you can't turn it around in 6 months. And that's when you've got absolutely no constraints. We've got the constraints of the salary cap. We've got the constraints of really watertight contracts that are very hard to get out of with players. So we do need to be patient, but it is very difficult for us really rusted on fans, because we do ride the highs and the lows, and we do want the team, really, really deeply want the team to do well. The communication, I think, just with that paragraph. So the thing is that a lot of their communication is very general, very much aimed at a general audience. There's a lot of people out there that will go to a West Tigers game in a West Tigers jersey and may have a West Tigers membership, but they're not riding the highs and lows like we do. They might just see it as, there's a lot of fans out there that just see it as a good day out, and they get to see a good game and they're happy if the Tigers did okay, then that's okay. So the communication does have to be more broad than just to the crazy diehards like us. So I'm not overly fussed with that. A lot of their marketing is aimed at trying to get, because that's where the opportunity is, isn't it? That's where there are all the rusted ons. We're going to be here no matter what. Well, sometimes I question that, but we're probably going to be here no matter what over the long run. But it's the people out there that are the more casual observers that they want to try and convert into members and convert into becoming more rusted on and more reliable and consistent with their memberships and their support of the club. So it's hard, but it's really, really hard to be patient, and it's really frustrating. And I suppose in a way it's just as frustrating to be competitive and keep losing as it is.
It's more frustrating that.
Yeah, than when
it's probably like I read some comments on both the forums, and it's sort of like, if we had somehow won that game by a point, you're probably seeing a lot of praise in the performance. But because you're so angry and frustrated with another loss, even if it's a close one, the narrative sort of, or the language changes.
Well, normally you've still got a certain amount of like if you look at a South fan compared to a West Tigers fan this year, it's an entirely different thing, because the South fans know that this is temporary.
They're not trying.
And they've got plenty of wins in the bank, and they've had plenty of success. And so you think to yourself, well, we're going to have a bad year. It's a clean-out year. The Broncos had it a few years ago, but the Broncos fans always knew they were going to bounce back. For us, we've become so conditioned to be at the bottom because it's not just the last couple of years. It's the last, really, since 2014, where it's just been sort of disappointment after disappointment. Losing a generational player like Tedesco, all of the other things that have happened to us as fans that we've had to soak up, and not a lot of joy. And the joy doesn't seem to be coming. We don't know when it will come, and it's not hard to lose a bit of faith that it ever will come back. And especially when you look at the competition. And I think that's a good point that you make, Eddie, that, and not to dispute what Gary was saying, but in the old days, the standard of competition that you came up against every week wasn't like it is today. The teams today just seem so much more professional and generally so much more difficult to beat. And I think that we are mostly doing our best as a team, but there's just some deficiencies there, and we hope that those deficiencies get filled relatively quickly. But it's hard. It's not hard to lose a bit of faith when you think, well, what's to say it won't be 4 wooden spoons in a row?
Well, that's the thing. Like we allowed ourselves under that previous management to just even when we were finishing those 9th and 10th, we had some good rosters at times then, but eventually we just bottomed out. And I think we allowed ourselves to fall so far below the NRL standard that this is a season which feels really strange because it's hard to be critical of the roster and the coaching for me, what they're doing each week. But you look at the table and it's sort of the similar sort of result. So I'd be interested in what he, when he talked, his first 2 bullet points were roster and coaching. I wonder deep down what he really thinks, because we won't know that. He's not going to say that to the public, to members. But I remember when he came in February or January, he sort of said, 80% of this roster, something like that, or winning roster is already in place. Like, really? Do you really, really think that? Maybe 30 or 40% or 50%.
Yeah.
He's talking about, I like how he's talking about we are building the club from the bottom up, which is the only way to do it. And Canterbury is the good example. They're starting to see some fruits of it. And I was critical of Gould and that, but, they've slowly built their roster and they've brought in some interesting signings, almost like some soldiers to take some hits for a couple of years. A lot of utilities, but it's bearing fruit in terms of the depth in their club at the moment. Maybe we could see that next year with a bit more cream, and how he describes it with Luai and Taruva. But, and then I think coaching staff's doing a good job, but I still have massive question marks over having Hyington and Farah there, because I just think when you've got an attack that is not filled with brilliant players, we need a little bit more help there, because that's been evident that maybe the attacking structures look a little bit better, but the ultimate results is 2 tries a game or 12, 14 points a game. It's so hard to win.
Yeah. Well, Robbie Farah was a great player, but what are his credentials to be an attacking coach?
Yeah.
How did he get that job other than being a West Tigers great? And I put a lot of thought into the West Tigers, and I really think that we've been on life support since around that time with Ivan Cleary. When that Ivan Cleary thing happened, I think that set us up for the following 5 years, and we're still, maybe I hope we've bottomed out and we're starting to climb out, but I just feel like our cards were marked for a really, really difficult time, given the contracts that he left us with and the mess that we were in at that time, Gary.
Yeah, the hard thing I'm finding this year is I can look at our games and I can look at what we're doing and I can see improvements. And I think Eddie said it earlier, if you use the eye test, things do look better out on the field. I think our attacking structures do look better than they have for a couple of years. Our defensive structures look way better. But there's no real change in the results. There's no real change, and probably arguably worse. I haven't looked at the stats, but our points we're scoring, I think, would have to...
Slightly worse.
Yeah, I would have thought it would have dropped compared to last season. But our attack looks better. And for me, it's a really hard thing to... Because there's some really good moments, and then like a last pass won't go to hand, or we're just not finishing off those plays correctly, even though that attack is looking much better than it was looking last year. It's a lot less one out than last year. There's a lot more shape to what we're doing. There's a lot more of the block plays that a lot of sides have tended to be using. We barely used them last year. They still do look clunky and slow, but they don't look as clunky and slow as they did last year when we ran them. But it hasn't made a change in the amount of points we're able to score. It hasn't made a change in the number of wins we're being able to get. Our defence has improved, but our scoring's dropped. And our red zone attack, I don't think, would have improved much at all. We look most dangerous probably when we shift the ball 50 metres out from the line. I think that's when we look the most dangerous, the most potent in attack. And those sort of things haven't improved. And that's what's frustrating for me this year is effort seems to be better. The attack looks better. The defence is better. That goal line defence is a lot better than it has been. But we're not scoring any more points and we're not winning any more games.
Gary, there's been a tree's fallen on Joel's house in Oatley, and there's a blackout. So
look, tell the truth. We kicked him off. He's been given the boot from the rest of the pod. Sent off, poor behaviour.
I've been I've been put in charge of the last 5 minutes of the podcast, Gary. So I was on my slightly trying to wind Joel up. I was talking about Shane Richardson and his email that he sent to members, and I was looking at the timeline of his when he's going to decide on the home ground. So he's put a June 30 deadline on it, I think. It's probably already decided, but anyway. Does the fact that, potentially we could have lost 8, 10 in a row by then, we have a game at Leichhardt in the middle of June. If that happens to be our third win of the season, our second win at Leichhardt, I know that's not going to blow Shane Richardson off what he wants to do, but could that potentially bring a bit more angst around the supporter base?
I think it definitely bring a bit more angst around the supporter base. There's already a couple of groups that are up and running on socials trying to save the ground, and it's going to be an interesting conversation. It's not so much interesting to me around what happens with Leichhardt and Campbelltown. What's interesting for me is where we tend to go with the majority of our games, which sounds like it's going to be one of the big stadiums. So that's the decision that I'm most interested in.
Just wrapping up, Gary, on the email itself, there was wasn't too much detail in it, but there were hints that there could be some more signings, perhaps though, in terms of upgrading juniors or signing some more juniors. Did you read it that way?
Yeah, and some signings around the New South Wales Cup level as well. I think that's quite important. When you have a look at how the Magpies, and I know they won on the weekend, but how they've performed so far this season, they're running down the bottom of the table as well. And he mentions in the article that we've made a conscious decision to put some of those juniors, those promising juniors we've got coming through, to put them up into New South Wales Cup instead of playing them in the SG Ball and Jersey Flag. And I think if you're going to do that, then providing really good experienced players around them is really crucial. Otherwise, you're just putting like lambs to the slaughter. And I think we've done that a little bit this year. We're lacking those experienced hands, those guys that have a few years playing in that New South Wales Cup at a high level around them to support that development. I don't think we're providing the best opportunity for those guys at the moment. What's the point of them getting flogged every week?
I was trying to decipher what he was saying when he talked about elite juniors and putting them in New South Wales Cup to try and fast track them. I don't know if you have the answer to this. I don't. But is he talking about some of the guys in our top 30 then? Or is he talking about guys outside? Because we've often, over the last 6 weeks, spoken about some of those guys almost not as dead wood, but have certainly hasn't progressed. So are there guys there he's talking about that are potentially going to come into the 30, or guys already in the 30 that are playing maybe a level above where they would be?
Yeah, guys like Talon De Silva. Talon De Silva could still be playing in those lower age groups, but we're majority playing him in that New South Wales Cup side. I think that's in an effort to get him playing against men, getting playing good minutes against men, and preparing him better for moving into that NRL squad. Well, he's in the NRL squad, but into that starting team or that first 17 in the years to come. But if you're not providing them with the quality around them, and if they're going out every week and getting scores put on them like they have been, I think a decision needs to be made what's better for them. If you have a look at our Jersey Flag side, it's up near the top of the table. So it's doing quite well. Our Mats team did really well, made the grand final again this year. So there are promising juniors coming through, and we have a number of those juniors who have moved up into that New South Wales Cup side. I think decisions need to be made. What's most beneficial for their development would be dropping back and playing that Jersey Flag side that's actually performing quite well, be better for them, or are we better to leave them playing against men but getting some scores run up against them like they are at the moment?
Okay, Gary. Well, we'll be back, I assume, on the Wednesday podcast, my podcast. There'll be an update on the tree in Oatley, on Joel, whether he's still alive or...
So do you consider this like a promotion? You've made it to like a weekend pod, a proper pod, and you're not just hosting like the midweek like garbage pod?
Well, I'll let the listeners determine that, Gary. It's not for me to determine, but Declan hopefully will be back. I saw that his soccer team, Gary, Celtic, won their 100th title in a row, a very exciting league over there in Scotland, so he'll be happy.
Well, it's lucky because you saw how upset he was on Saturday after the Tigers losing. I think he needed a little bit of joy in his life.
It's good to see a bit of passion back. I was worried he was getting a bit zen-like. He was becoming, everything's all good. But, back when Madge was a coach, he used to get really passionate, so it was good.
But you thought he was becoming a little bit like me, where it's like water off a duck's back?
No one's like you, Gary. All right, Gary, thank you for tonight, and thank you to Joel, who dropped out 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, early mark for Joel, so maybe he should jump on the midweek pod to make up for it.
We'll wait and see. See you guys.
Thanks, Eddie.